Have you ever noticed how the choices you make today feel less like decisions and more like echoes? You think you are acting freely, moving forward with clarity, yet beneath the surface something older is guiding you. Something fragile, something you cannot quite name. Every adult carries a child inside them, a child whose laughter has long faded, whose tears have long dried, but whose needs remain unfinished. You hear it in the silences between your words. You feel it in the sudden heaviness that grips you when no one is watching. Picture this, a small child, sitting in a dimly lit room, waiting for footsteps that never come. On the floor lies a toy, abandoned mid-play, its story left unfinished. Outside, life goes on, but inside, a shadow stretches taller and taller across the walls. That shadow does not disappear as the years pass. Instead, it grows alongside the child, following them into adulthood. You may think you've outgrown it, but it still moves with you, whispering into your choices, bending your relationships, deciding what kind of love you believe you deserve. Perhaps you bury yourself in ambition, as though success could silence the voice that once whispered you were not enough. Or you retreat into silence, believing that invisibility is safety, because once, when you spoke, no one listened. Maybe you wear perfection like armor, each polished surface reflecting what you hope will keep you safe from judgment. But beneath every mask is the same child, still waiting, still wondering if someone will notice. Psychologists call it unfinished attachment. The nervous system remembers what the conscious mind tries to forget. When you were small, your brain was still forming pathways, still deciding what love and safety would mean. If you met absence instead of presence, criticism instead of care, the wiring etched itself with that truth. Love is conditional, safety is uncertain. And so, even now, your body reacts as if the past were still happening. You feel fear where there is none, shame where it is undeserved, emptiness where there should be belonging. This is the tragedy of a ruined childhood, not only the moments of neglect or pain themselves, but the way they linger, invisible, reshaping destinies long after the rooms have gone silent. You are not simply who you decided to be, you are who you had to become to survive. And until you see the child still alive inside you, you risk confusing survival for identity, wounds for truth. To understand this more deeply, we must return to the beginning, to the soil where the first roots were planted, to the child before the mask, to the place where protection was still unknown and the soul was still unguarded. To understand the tragedy of ruined childhood, we must begin where it all starts, before you even knew how to protect yourself. Have you ever wondered how early the story of your life was written? Not in the achievements you chased as an adult, but in the quiet, unrecorded moments when you were small, fragile, and desperate for love. Childhood is supposed to be a garden, watered with attention and sunlight, where trust and safety grow naturally. But for many, the soil was dry, the watering can empty, and silence replaced the warmth that was needed most. Picture a child waiting at the edge of a room, their drawing clutched tightly in their hands, eyes fixed on the door, waiting for a parent to notice, to smile, to approve. The minutes stretch into hours, and the only sound is the ticking of a clock that seems louder than their heartbeat. Eventually, the paper crumples in their grip, and with it, something inside them folds too. That simple absence, that lack of acknowledgement, becomes more than disappointment. It becomes identity. The child whispers to themselves, "Maybe I'm not enough." Psychology calls this attachment theory. In the first years of life, your brain learns how safe the world is, how reliable love will be. If caregivers respond, with consistency, you grow with a secure attachment, a foundation that tells you, "I am worthy, and the world will hold me." But if love is unpredictable, sometimes present, sometimes withdrawn, you learn anxious attachment, always seeking, always fearing abandonment. And if warmth is replaced with coldness, you may build avoidant attachment, teaching yourself not to need anyone, because needing hurts too much. These patterns are not conscious choices. They are the architecture of your nervous system, etched into your very biology before you could even form words. The tragedy is that children cannot separate themselves from their environment. When love is absent, they do not say, "My parent cannot give." They say, "I must not deserve." When neglect echoes louder than comfort, the self contracts. Like a flower folding under the absence of rain, the garden of childhood becomes a place of weeds and silence, where innocence collapses not because of what was done, but because of what was never given. And so, the child learns to survive. They become quiet when they should have spoken. They become self-sufficient when they should have been held. They build stories in their minds about being too much, or not enough, carrying them into every future room they will ever walk into. But children don't stay children. They grow. They learn to hide their hunger for love behind carefully crafted masks, and survival, once born of necessity, becomes a way of being. The mask becomes the face, the shadow becomes the self. And this is where the tragedy deepens, because survival may protect you, but it also begins to define you. Have you ever asked yourself why you act one way in public and feel another in silence? Why the smile you show others feels like a performance, while the voice within you whispers of emptiness? The truth is that what you call personality is often survival dressed up as character. What began in childhood as a wound becomes, in adulthood, a mask. You may be the person who laughs the loudest at the party, your voice rising above the music, your stories carrying the room. Yet when you return home, when the door clicks shut and the lights go out, you feel invisible again, perhaps even more than before. Or you may be the quiet one, calm, dependable, always agreeable. People call you kind, but they do not realize your kindness is born less from generosity than from fear that deep down you believe disagreement could cost you love. Psychologists call these adaptations coping mechanisms, but you know them simply as the way you live, the people pleaser who bends so others won't break away, the overachiever who piles trophies high, hoping each one will silence the old echo of not being enough, the cold, detached adult who swears they need no one, when in truth they once needed someone so badly it nearly destroyed them. These are not flaws. They are armor-protective layers forged when you were too young to know that protection would one day imprison you. Neuroscience tells us that the brain wires itself to expect what it once received. If love was unpredictable, your nervous system learns hypervigilance, always scanning, always preparing. If affection was rare, your body suppresses longing, teaching you numbness as the safest path. The mask is not fake, it is neurological. It is the story your cells continue to tell long after the original chapter ended. But the tragedy of the mask is that it works. People admire the charm, the success, the composure. They see the character, but not the cost. They do not notice that your laughter feels hollow, that your victories taste of ash, that your independence is loneliness dressed in pride. The world rewards the mask because it makes you useful, agreeable, impressive. Yet, every night, when the performance ends, the child beneath it still waits to be seen. And this is the paradox. The very armor that once saved you now keeps you trapped. You wear it so long, you forget. There was ever a face beneath it, but the body does not forget. The heart still beats against the shell, and sooner or later, the cracks begin to show. Yet behind every mask lies a nervous system, a brain, a psychology forever shaped by early years. And to understand the weight of that, you must look not only at the face you show, but at the shadow it hides. Why do certain fears grip you with such intensity, even when logic whispers there is nothing to fear? Why does intimacy feel like danger, or silence like abandonment? The answer does not lie in weakness. It lies in the architecture of your brain, in the invisible scars carved by childhood experience. Neuroscience shows us that trauma does not remain a story in memory. It rewires the body itself. When you were small and love felt uncertain, your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, learned to fire at the slightest hint of rejection. Each absence, each dismissal, each moment of neglect became encoded as danger. Cortisol, the hormone of stress, surged again and again, training your nervous system to live on edge. To this day, your body may still brace for storms even when the sky above you is clear. You are not overreacting, you are reliving. Psychologists like Erik Erikson long argued that childhood unfolds in stages, each one a test of trust, autonomy, and belonging. When those early stages fracture, when trust is broken before it is fully formed, the foundation of identity itself becomes unstable. You may succeed later in life, you may build careers and relationships, but deep inside, the original question remains unanswered. Am I safe? Am I enough? Gabor Mate, who has spent his life studying trauma, explains it simply. Trauma is not the event itself, but the disconnection it forces inside you. It is the silence you had to create to survive, the feelings you had to bury to keep moving forward. And though the event may be decades past, the adaptation remains alive. That fear you feel before intimacy it is not weakness. It is the nervous system replaying a childhood script, trying to protect you from a pain it believes is inevitable. Metaphors help make sense of what the science shows. Imagine your body as a musical instrument, tuned in childhood. If the strings were stretched too tight, every note now vibrates with tension. If they were left too loose, every sound wavers with instability. You play the song of your life with the tuning you were given, unaware that the music you create is being shaped by hands that once reached for love and found nothing. The paradox is that survival adaptations often succeed in the short term. Hypervigilance keeps you alert. Emotional detachment shields you from rejection. Perfectionism brings praise. Yet, these adaptations carry shadows. What once protected you now confines you. The mask that hides your fear also hides your capacity for true connection. The walls that kept danger out also keep love away. And what begins as survival often becomes a shadow, haunting everything you build. Have you ever felt as though a part of you lives in the dark, unseen yet pulling the strings of your life? You move forward, make choices, even celebrate victories, yet something within remains restless, unfinished, unsettled. This is the shadow of a ruined childhood, the ghost of the inner child who never stopped waiting. The shadow is not abstract. It is the house within you filled with locked rooms, each one holding a memory you were too young to process. You walk past these doors every day, pretending they do not exist, yet you feel the draft of cold air seeping through the cracks. The child inside becomes a ghost, haunting your relationships, whispering in your silence, guiding you toward patterns that make no sense until you trace them back to their origin. You may find yourself drawn again and again to the same kind of partner, replaying the same toxic script. The neglect you once endured becomes the neglect you tolerate. The criticism that once broke you becomes the voice you now expect, even seek. Self-sabotage creeps in quietly. You ruin opportunities not because you want to fail, but because failure feels familiar, and familiarity feels safer than the unknown. Some turn to addiction, not for pleasure, but for escape from the emptiness, from the echo of locked rooms they fear to open. Psychologists describe this as repetition compulsion, the drive to reenact the original wound in hopes of finally rewriting the ending. But because the root remains unhealed, the cycle repeats, leaving you chained to the same pain, only with different faces, different years, different disguises. Neuroscience shows that unresolved trauma keeps the nervous system in survival mode, unable to distinguish between past and present. So you relive what you never resolved, and the ghost of the child continues to direct the story. Cinematic imagery captures it best. Adults carrying invisible chains, each link forged from a moment of silence, a withheld embrace, an unspoken word. Entire generations haunted by one absence, passing down patterns like family heirlooms. The wound of the parent becomes the burden of the child, until someone finally dares to stop and face the darkness. The tragedy of the shadow is that it convinces you it is who you are. You forget that beneath the chains there was once a garden. Beneath the ghost there was once a child who only wanted to be seen. And until you turn toward that darkness, it will continue to guide you, quietly, destructively, inevitably. But it isn't just personal, it's cultural. Society itself teaches us to normalize these wounds. Have you ever noticed how the world rewards you for hiding your pain? From the moment you step into society, you are handed rules disguised as virtues. Strong men don't cry. Good girls stay quiet. Dignity means silence. These lessons are not written on paper, yet they are etched into you through every sideways glance, every unspoken expectation, every moment when vulnerability was met, not with care, but with shame. Imagine a boy falling to the ground, knees scraped and eyes filled with tears. Before the blood even dries, someone tells him, "Don't cry, be tough." He swallows his pain, not because it disappears, but because he learns that expression costs him belonging. Or think of the girl who raises her voice in protest, only to be scolded for being too much. Slowly, she learns that silence keeps her safe, that approval comes not from truth but from restraint. These stories repeat across classrooms, churches, and families until they no longer feel like rules, they feel like reality. Schools reinforce this lesson when they prize obedience over curiosity, when the child who questions is labeled disruptive, when grades matter more than feelings. Religion often magnifies it, teaching that suffering should be borne quietly, that sacrifice is holy, that submission is a pathway to love. And so, the seeds planted in childhood are watered by institutions, growing into towering walls of conformity. You are told the mask is not only useful, it is necessary. Philosophers have long observed that civilizations build themselves upon conformity. Society does not thrive on the raw truth of its individuals, but on their ability to suppress, to adapt, to play roles that keep the collective machine running smoothly. To reveal too much of your pain is to risk unsettling the order, and so you learn to tuck it away, to bury it beneath performance. In exchange, you are rewarded with acceptance, but it is a fragile acceptance, conditional, hollow, dependent on never removing the mask. And while the world applauds the armor you wear, the cost remains hidden within you. The boy who never cried becomes the man who cannot connect. The girl who silenced her voice becomes the woman who doubts her worth. Entire generations inherit this quiet agreement. Conceal your wounds, perform your role, and call it strength. But strength without honesty is a prison. What society calls resilience is often only repression by another name. And repression, though invisible to the eye, is not invisible to the soul. But the soul pays the price, and the body begins to carry the weight of what the child was never allowed to speak. What happens when the wounds of childhood are never given air to heal? They do not disappear, they wait. They wait in the silence between conversations, in the emptiness after achievements, in the quiet moments of the night when there is nothing left to distract you. The past does not vanish, it hides inside you, shaping the way you feel, the way you love, the way you live. Picture a middle-aged adult sitting alone in a dimly lit kitchen. The house is quiet, but their chest is heavy, as if every unspoken word of the past is pressing down on them at once. For decades, they kept moving, working harder, smiling wider, pretending longer. But on this night, the mask finally slips. Tears come without permission, the body trembles, and they wonder how so many years passed without ever feeling truly seen. This breakdown is not weakness. It is the weight of an unlived childhood finally demanding to be felt. Psychology explains it with precision. When trauma remains unresolved, the nervous system stays locked in survival mode. Anxiety becomes the background hum of your life, a constant scanning for threats that may never come. Depression seeps in like fog, dulling every color, muting every sound. Emotional numbness sets in not because you lack feelings, but because once, feeling was too dangerous. Relationships suffer. You push people away or cling too tightly, caught in the same cycle of fear and longing that began before you could even name it. The metaphors capture it best. You are a cracked mirror that still reflects, but never without distortion. You are a heart stitched too tightly to beat freely, keeping you alive but never allowing you to feel fully alive. The child, who once whispered, "I am not enough," grows into the adult who cannot shake that echo, no matter how much love surrounds them. And what makes this pain so haunting is its invisibility. The world may see you as successful, composed, even happy. They see the trophies, the family photos, the laughter at dinner tables. But inside, you carry a quiet collapse, a hollowness that no applause can fill. Loneliness becomes less about being alone and more about feeling unseen, even in a crowded room. The tragedy is not only the pain itself, but the years it steals. Years of joy muted, years of intimacy disrupted, years of selfhood sacrificed to a wound that never asked to be born. But even in this bleakness, a truth lingers, like a flicker in the dark. And yet there is another path, a way not to erase the tragedy, but to transform it. Have you ever wondered if the past can be rewritten? Not in the sense of erasing what was done, but in the sense of loosening its grip on who you are now. The truth is, you cannot go back and give the child what they were denied. You cannot place new words in the mouths of parents who stayed silent, nor can you undo the nights when you cried into the dark. But healing is not about rewriting the past, it is about reclaiming the future that the past tried to steal. Imagine the garden of your childhood, once dry and abandoned, left to weeds and silence. For years you may have believed it was beyond repair, that nothing could grow in that soil again. But healing begins with something deceptively small, planting a new seed, journaling the feelings you once buried, speaking aloud the truths you were told to swallow, allowing yourself to cry, not as weakness, but as reclamation. Each act of honesty is water, each act of gentleness toward yourself is sunlight. Slowly, the soil stirs, and life begins to return. Therapists often speak of reparenting the inner child. This does not mean pretending you are small again. It means giving yourself now what you once needed then. When fear rises, you do not shame yourself. You hold it, the way a child should have been held. When shame whispers, "I am not enough," you answer with the steadiness that was once absent. You are safe, you are worthy, you belong. Neuroscience affirms this truth. The brain is plastic, capable of rewiring, of forming new pathways. What was etched in pain can be softened with care. What was rigid with fear can be reshaped through consistent acts of love. Shadow work, too, becomes part of this journey. To unmask slowly, to dare to open the locked rooms inside you, to sit with the ghost of the child you once were. It is not about banishing the shadow, but about learning its language. Each time you face what you avoided, the monster shrinks, the chains loosen, and the mask begins to fall away. This path is not easy. It demands patience, and it often feels unbearably slow. But remember, survival was once your greatest achievement. Now healing can be. You do not have to become someone else, you only have to return to yourself. And so we return to the beginning, the child, the wound, the silence, but this time with wisdom. What do you do with the child still living inside you? The one who waited for love that never arrived, who learned to hide instead of reaching out, who mistook silence for safety. You carry them everywhere, whether you acknowledge them or not. And so the question becomes not whether they exist, but whether you will keep repeating their silence, or whether you will finally choose to break it. Every ruined childhood leaves two paths: to echo what was done to you, or to answer it with something new. Imagine walking back into that dim room where the child once sat waiting. This time, the door does not remain closed. You enter, you kneel, you meet their eyes instead of passing them by. The toy is still there, the shadow is still stretching across the wall, but the difference is that someone has finally arrived. Healing begins in that moment, not because the past changes, but because you have chosen to change your relationship to it. The ghost becomes a presence. The locked room becomes a place you dare to enter. Philosophy reminds us that suffering cannot be erased, but it can be transfigured. The very wound that once silenced you can become the source of your deepest clarity. The absence of love can teach you to give it freely. The years of invisibility can make you the one who finally sees others. What was once shadow does not vanish, but it can become the outline of strength, a reminder that light only means something because darkness once existed. And though the pain may never fully dissolve, it does not have to define you. Neuroscience shows us that even a brain shaped by trauma can grow new pathways, that the nervous system can be rewired with care and presence. What once felt like destiny is not unbreakable fate. It is an unfinished story, waiting for a different ending. So, you stand now between two choices. You can keep carrying the chains, or you can let them teach you where to find freedom. You can continue repeating the silence, or you can become the one who finally speaks. The tragedy of a ruined childhood is not that it scars you, but that it lingers, patient, waiting for you to decide. And perhaps the most haunting, hopeful truth is this: the tragedy of a ruined childhood is not that it defines you, but that it waits until you decide to answer it.